Hello and welcome to the Car Nut channel. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at the 2022 Toyota Corolla and specifically the SE trim. This is a Nightshade edition. We're going to take it for a drive and we're going to talk about what makes this car good, what makes it not so good. But before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos if you are a returning subscriber. Well, thank you so much for watching another one of my videos, and without further ado, let's get right into it. Let's take the Corolla for a drive and talk about it. So this is the SE trim, which has the 2.0 M20 FKS engine mated with the Direct Shift K120 CVT transmission. Some people dislike the CVT transmission, so Toyota's been working on this. This is nothing new. It came out a few years ago. It's basically a CVT transmission with a physical first gear. It's actually a physical first gear from a manual transmission. Let's test it out. Let me safely stop here. So I came to a complete stop. We're not in sport mode. We're not in anything. I'm going to take off. There you go. There's an actual shift. It's not a simulated shift. It is an actual mechanical shift, because that first gear from basically a manual transmission really makes life much better, because usually with CVTs, when you take off up to like 35 miles an hour or so, you have that horrendous drone. And in this, there goes the shift. It just doesn't feel like it. And what's even more, what I really like about this CVT, look, CVTs can be really annoying. They drone, and if you have the hint of a car guy in you, you're not gonna like it. It's just annoying. But this, I think they did a really good job, and this seems better than the K313, which you'll find in the other trims other than the sport one. Even when you get past that first gear, I mean, now we're not really in first gear, you still feel the simulated shifts. You know, they try to not make it just drone its heart out. It just feels better. You feel these simulated shifts, and yeah, they feel fake. Of course, not like that first shift where it's an actual shift, but it's better. I like it. It just makes it less droney, less CVT-like, while you still get the benefits of a CVT. That is a big plus, and I really like that. And more on the personal side of things, folks, I'll tell you this. Back in 2014, I bought my wife a brand new 2014 S Corolla. This is the same car that we brought our kids, one of my kids at least, from the hospital when she was born. It's a very special car, and it was very hard to let it go. We needed a bigger car, and we had to let her go. We had that 14 Corolla for 5 years. It was basically the same as this one. This is a Nightshade edition, so it's a little bit different, but still, it was the same recipe. It was a sport model of the Corolla. It had a little bit more options, but other than that, it was similar. And to get in this car again, after a few years of not having that one, let me talk about the actual improvements here. The one thing I did not like about the old one was the CVT transmission. Of course, that is improved. We already talked about it. But the other thing is the inside design. So the dashboard in that car was like standing up straight. It almost made you feel a little claustrophobic. You just had a giant hill in front of you and you had to look over it. This one has these curves. It still have that stand-up feel, but not as much as the previous one, where it was just a flat stand. But with that comes a small downside, which I've talked about this in a previous video talking about this generation Corolla. These humps on the side. Every time I get in, I hit my knee here. I'm not a very tall person. I can imagine if you're taller, this is gonna be like 10 times worse. That is one thing. You know, they did this for design to make that like swooping look, but it does get in the way, and I wish they would just let it go. In the Corolla Cross, they actually let it go. But here, it's still here, and it is something of an annoyance. And one thing I love about the Corolla, and the Corolla name has been around for a very, very long time. This is not a new model that needs introduction. Some parts of the world, this is the mainstream car. Perhaps in the US, because we love big cars and we drive a lot of long distances. Smaller cars are less appealing in a way, but this is a proper Toyota model. It is a simple car. It is very good in reliability, in its overall package and value. But I think this generation, even starting with the previous generation, they started to add more convenience features hidden within this simple, rugged package. I mean, look at this car, even in the base trim model, and starting with the previous generation. In 2014, when that generation came out, it was the first model to have standard LED headlights. I mean, in 2014, you go to the Line Cruiser, which is the highest model, better headlights were an option. You still had halogen headlights in the base model. In the base model of Corolla 14, you had standard LED headlights, which were great. And then you come to this. When this came out, in first the hatchback in 19, and then the sedan. By the way, they're both exactly the same, just the back. Drivetrain-wise, construction-wise, even driving-wise, they're exactly the same. But you go into the features, and you really get past, this is just a Corolla, basic transportation. This was the first car to have lane tracing assist, which basically is one step below autonomous driving. I mean, this makes it such an easy drive on the highway. You just set the cruise control. Of course, it is adaptive and it is standard. And then the lane tracing assist keeps you in the lane. That is really nice. I mean, this is a Corolla. This is an entry-level model designed for economy, designed to be a very basic car that gets you around very reliably. You don't expect features like that in a car like this, and let alone standard. And then we come into this generation. Electronic park and brake, standard. Brake hold, standard. All the Bluetooth amenities. And down the road in this generation, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. All these features. I mean, remember, this is a Corolla. Price-wise, this is a lot of options. This is some big-name options. You go into some luxury cars, they're still having those things as options, not standard. And this is standard here. The cool thing that I love about it is it's still a basic car. You sit in it, there's not a million buttons, and it's super confusing to operate. Everything is very simple. And more on the driving side and the comfort side of things. Ever since the previous generation, and that carries on this generation, the back seat room is very generous for a Corolla. Comparing it to, say, a Camry, if you're like shopping around looking at a Camry obviously is bigger, it's more expensive car too. But looking at a Camry, it's narrower than a Camry, but the back seat feels almost exactly the same size, leg room, headroom, everything else. And that's pretty impressive, and that's actually good engineering because they push the seat back as much as it can go back without compromising the trunk space. Obviously, trunk space is smaller than a Camry, but it's still not small. It is adequate. Like I told you, my 2014 Corolla, we had a kid, we had a front-facing seat, and all this stuff, it still fit in the back. I mean, this is a small car. For you to fit a backward seat for a baby, this is a pretty big deal. And this is why I like the Corolla. I like the engineering that went behind the things that nobody talks about. The back seat is very impressive in this. And one more thing about the Corolla. You know, over the years, they've gotten better looking. You know, you don't have to drive a economy basic car that just looks drab and just uninteresting. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's nice to have a car that actually looks nice. They actually made an effort to make it as nice as possible without breaking your bank when you go buy one. And the previous generation, especially in the S model, it seemed a little conservative. And that was the word I'm going to use here. It just looked almost exactly the same. It had different wheels, had a slightly different bumper, but otherwise it was exactly the same. But this takes things back again, just like the previous generation to the 2014 to the 19. It took things again where the sport model is actually physically different. And I think they really did a good job. I mean, it's a good looking car in this trim. In the more basic trim, it looks okay. I always thought the front looks good, but the back doesn't match. But in the SE trim, or even the XSE, it looks better. I mean, after all, this is not a car designed to really move your emotions and make all the car guy in you be all excited. That is not the intent of this car. The intent of this car is to be a reliable, conservative, functional car. And I love that they made the outside look interesting, look nice. without compromising the function. One thing I disliked about the previous generation that I owned, the 2014, the S model had these horribly uncomfortable seats. They were bucket seats. Now granted, I do have back problems. I'm a mechanic. That just comes with the territory. The front seat in the S model of the previous Corolla was such a big bolstered seat, didn't have lumbar support, and it was just uncomfortable. This, however, it still have these bucket seats because it's a sport model, but they changed the bolsters to a little softer, so now they're not as pushing into your body. And it's actually more comfortable, in my opinion. I've been driving this car for a week. My back is not screaming. We're good. I mean, it got to a point in my previous car where I had to almost modify the seat to be comfortable in my own car. After an hour drive, I was sore, and that was not good. This, I've already driven it for an hour plus. I'm very comfortable. I like it. Noise level in this car, of course, this is an entry-level car. It's loud. But you know what? Comparing it to the previous generation, it is not as loud. And the biggest thing that is not as loud is the CVT. I mean, here we're going like 50 miles an hour. It's just that simulated shift doesn't make it as drony. And I like that. This is not a fast car. This is not a car that is thrilling again, but you don't have to deal with the drone of the CVT. And I like this. I really like this new CVT. This is, I think, as good as you're going to have in a CVT. This is even nicer than my Camry hybrid, which is an eCVT, different, but it still drives similar. That drones a lot when you press the gas. This doesn't as much. I like it. I like this car a lot. I like how it looks on the outside. I like how it looks on the inside. I like its functions, and I like how it has so many options for such an entry-level car. They're all hidden and not in your face, but they're actually very functional, and they're nice to have standard in a car in this segment. Now, some of the things that I don't like about this car is the price. The price is progressively going up and up to a point where when you fully option this car, you're deep into Camry territory, and of course the Camry is a better value car, but the only difference is the Camry is more expensive. This is now entering deep into Camry territory. In the past, when you fully option a Corolla like this, you're just barely at the base model of the Camry. But now, with the ridiculous Corolla Apex, which I really don't like, equally like the TRD Camry, you're into SE Camry territory at $28,000 or something. That just doesn't make sense. Why don't you just buy a Camry? It's a bigger car, made by the same company. It's also reliable. It just starts to kind of become a problem. This car that we're driving, Nightshade Edition, is just around $24,000, which I know in today's market, that's, if you can find it at that price, that's good. But if we go back to normal times, that's a little up there, because you can get almost in a base model Camry for that. This is a little upper trim. If you go to lower trims, they're less. But that's one of the concerns. The other thing is, I don't like these bulges on the side of the dash. I hit them with my knee every time. And if you go into the non-SE trim, the rear really doesn't match the front. Looks-wise, we still have hubcaps. I understand it's an economy car, but these are the concerns. If there's a car guy inside of you when you go shopping for a car like this, these are the things that are going to bother you. And then the other thing is, it's loud. I mean, you can hear it. We're driving right now. It's loud. And if you're going, like, you used to drive an old Lexus and now you're trying to get rid of it, you don't want to spend too much on a new Lexus, you're just, you know what, I'll just get the Corolla. You're going to notice it. This thing is extremely loud, and that's just how they are. You drive on the highway, it's loud. It's better than the previous generation, but it's still, in car terms, it's loud. But again, this is universal in this segment, unless you go with like Lexus, Acura, or whatever, you know, the luxury brands. I think this car is perfectly suited for either newlyweds, single person, or even a small family. Maybe you have one kid, two kids. I mean, I had two kids driving this car when we owned the 14. It was similar size. We didn't have an issue. Yes, occasionally when we had a visitor or something, it was an issue. But fitting kids in the back, fitting a stroller in the trunk, it was tight, but it was not doable. What I love the most about the Corolla is it stays true to its core mission. This is a reliable car. This is a functional car. This is a car that you get in, drive effortlessly, because nothing is complicated. The AC controls are simple, the radio is simple to use, everything is laid out very simply. If you're upgrading from a previous Corolla, you just fit here right in without having to spend days and days fumbling through things to figure out how this works. Very simple. But the most impressive thing to me is that CVT transmission. This is as good as you can get with a CVT, and the overall standard options, they're really impressive. I mean, this is a basic car. We have all these options that sometimes come standard here, rival some high-end cars that have it as an option. That's pretty cool. Well, there you have it, folks. That is the Toyota Corolla. I really like this model. I have a personal connection with it, and I can tell you from my personal experience with my family what improved in this, what it's still not so improved, and the overall picture, so you can know if you're looking to buy one, you're looking to trade up your current Corolla or coming out from another model, if this is a car for you or not. I hope this video was helpful, informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. And until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.